Hello, and welcome to Weed Schooling. My name's Scott, and today we're going to look at a feeding schedule for while your plants are in flower. So we tend to like to do an organic style garden in terms of the feed. Now, we're going to have another video coming up shortly after this, so stay tuned on organic versus synthetic fertilizers. But just a quick thing on it, organic fertilizers doesn't necessarily mean organic in terms of how we know it for food. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Organic fertilizers are going to feed the microbes in your soil, which in a sense break down those nutrients and make them available to your plants. Synthetic nutrients are totally bioavailable. They're going to be ready for your plant to take them up. They bypass the microbes. One of the major issues with that is it doesn't feed the microbes in your soil. So you're not building soil, your soil's not becoming a real living, vital organism. So there's the trade-offs with that. So in this particular feeding schedule, we're gonna have a compost tea, which is gonna be more of an organic style of feeding, but we're also gonna incorporate some liquid bone meal, which in a sense is considered synthetic, but bone meal is not synthetic. It's refined so that it's and extracted so that it's fully available to your plant, and it bypasses the microbes and it doesn't have to go through a process before your plant uptakes it. So we're doing both, and the reason that we are doing both in this case is because we want to make sure that the plant is getting everything it needs right now to have really big, dense flowers and stay robust. At the same time, we want to be feeding the microbes in the soil because we constantly want to be building our soil. When that happens, organic farmers cannabis farmers who are going this organic fertilizing route see that their plants get bigger and bigger each year. And that's because they're building that soil. The microbes are healthier and the soil is richer. So we're going to come at the plants in this feeding schedule from both those angles, an organic style with the compost tea feeding the microbes, and also a synthetic style with bone meal, so that it's coming right at the plant right away. So, those of you who aren't familiar with compost tea, tune in for an episode coming up where we'll go into much more detail on how to do compost tea and a lot more of the benefits. But for now, we're just going to briefly touch on it. So with the compost tea, you can brew it in a big 50-gallon barrel. If you have bigger feed tanks, 250, 500 gallons, whatever it is. Some people will use kind of like a tea bag, a big tea bag that they'll put these nutrients and composts in. If you don't have one, it doesn't matter. You can just throw it in the barrel and they'll sit there. Another thing that's important to have is what's called bubblers. You can get them at your local grow shop, and they aerate the water. And this is important because when we're doing a compost tea, we're in a sense creating a living grounds for the microbes to flourish. So not only are we're adding nutrients in, which we're going to feed the microbes in the soil, but we're also exponentially increasing the microbes in the container that we're brewing the compost and putting more microbes into the soil. So it's kind of a two bangs for your buck here with the compost tea. So now this regimen, you're going to have to change a little bit as per your plants. If your plants are 2 feet tall and a couple feet wide, you're not going to go as extreme with this. But if you have a lot bigger plants, you can do this. Now, one way, if you're unsure, is to test. You can test on one plant. You can cut the dosage and feed it to one plant. If you have any kind of burn, you're going to see it within 24 hours. So that's a good way to go if you're unsure, if you feel like this may be too much. And for those of us who really like to push the limit, you can go on the higher end and you can even increase it. But again, it's best to just test it out on one plant, wait 24 hours and see what happens. So here's the compost tea. You have the unsulfured molasses, 1 teaspoon per gallon. Now I'll go back over after I go over this and just say how everything fits into this compost tea, its benefits, and how it's a player in this. Seabird guano, 0,11,0. Again, that 11 is the phosphorus, and 1 to 2 tablespoons per gallon. Liquid kelp and potash, 0,08. Now the 8 is going to be the potassium, which is just an overall benefit for the plant that it needs for disease resistance, uptaking nutrients, and that's going to be 2 to 4 tablespoons per gallon. And then you have azomite, micronized azomite. The granulized azomite is something that you can scratch into the surface. It's something that you can even do at this time, but we're going to put it into the tea. So you want to get micronized azomite, and you're going to do 2 teaspoons per gallon. So I'll just step aside so you can take a look, just so you can see the feeding schedule here. So the molasses is going to be, in a sense, food for the microbes. If any of you have ever made any kind of fermentation, you know that you're going to add some kind of yeast because of the sugars, and you're going to have something that's going to be in there, the sugars in there, that's going to help the culture grow. So the molasses is, in a sense, our sugar. It's food for the microbes, both in the compost tea and also when it gets put into the soil. It's also a carbohydrate, and the carbohydrate is an important thing for the microbes in the soil as well. So the seabird guano is going to be our main source of phosphorus, okay, and liquid kelp and potash. So the liquid kelp is a trace mineral. It's going to be beneficial for your overall soil health, and it's also going to, in a sense, be more food for your microbes, because we want to increase the microbial population, their vitality and their health in our soil when we're coming at an organic fertilization kind of perspective, standpoint, movement. So this is also going to be our potassium, and that's going to be, again, for the overall health and vitality of the plant. Now the azomite is also a trace mineral. Now the azomite is interesting in this compost tea, as it's not only just a food for the microbes, but again also a food for the microbes in the soil. Also, the azomite tends to break down a lot more slowly. So it's also a wonderful thing to do as you're getting towards the end of flower, because you're really wanting to think as an ongoing thing. When you're doing a synthetic fertilization schedule, you're not building soil, but from this perspective, we're wanting to really feed our microbes even throughout the winter. So putting the azomite in there, which is something that tends to break down a bit more slowly, it's going to be food for those microbes all winter long. Now there's other things that you can do to help build that soil and feed the microbes throughout the winter, so stay tuned in the coming weeks, and we're going to have a video for you on that. So again, this is your compost tea. Now you're going to aerate it, because the culture needs air. The microbes need oxygen to proliferate. So you'll have to have your compost tea near some electricity. You're going to put the bubblers inside your tea vessel, and you're going to brew it for about 48 hours. It's nice to have it covered, so it can kind of be dark, not in the full sunlight, and 24 hours is what you're going to brew it. Now there's 2 ways to administer the compost tea, and you can do both ways if you want. One way is a foliar spray. So after you brew it, you can dump the contents in a backpack sprayer, and you can foliar your plants. Now at a certain point, when they get a lot more into flower and the buds are getting more mature and they're bigger, you're not really wanting to foliar. You know, seabird guano is something that you just don't want to spray on your buds. But if you're still earlier in flower, or you don't really have any buds yet, or they're really small, it's something that you can do at this time. And then again, with the foliar, you're going to want to do that more in the evening or in the very early morning, like sunrise. And the plants uptake a lot of nutrients through their leaves, so foliar feeding is a great way to get nutrients right into your plants. The other way is a root drench. So you're just going to water it in, and this is going to feed the microbes in your soil. The microbes are going to break it down and make those nutrients available to your plant. Now, some of the nutrients in, for example, the liquid kelp and potash, seabird guano, are going to be bioavailable, meaning they can bypass the microbes, but it's only a small amount of them. Most of them need to be broken down by the microbes. So we do like to supplement the compost tea with something else that's going to be fully bioavailable, because we want to make sure we're hitting it with something that's going to uptake right away. However, we would have been doing this once they switched into flower anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks ago. So the microbes would have been breaking this down over the last 2 to 5 weeks and making it slowly available to the plant. But we're also wanting to do all that we can do. So we're going to also do a liquid bone meal. Now, you're not going to add this to your tea, but you can add it after the tea is done, right before you water. So our liquid bone meal is a 0-12-0. And this, again, is going to be more phosphorus, just like that seabird guano. So we're going to administer it at 2 to 4 tablespoons per gallon. Now, obviously, that's a pretty big range, 4 being double 2. So you're going to want to test it. Again, it's going to depend on how big your plants are, how rich your soil is, how vital your plants are, what they can handle. So it's something that you're going to want to test. So again, test on one plant, see how it goes, wait 24 hours, and then you can administer the same or increase it and test it on another plant. Or you could just go on the lower end, or you could even go with 1 tablespoon if you really just want to be on the safer side, and then gradually build up. This is, in a sense, a schedule. It's not something that you're doing just once. Now, how often you're going to do this is really going to depend on how big your plants are, what type of soil you're dealing with. If you have more clay soil, you're just not going to be able to water as much. If you have really great drainage, you're going to be able to water more. One important thing, which is a pitfall of all growers, probably the easiest pitfall we all fall into, is overwatering, which is going to cause a whole range of issues that none of us want. So you don't want to get too overzealous and just try to hit them with this feeding schedule every few days. You should, at this point, have a watering schedule that you're familiar with, that is feeling like it's working for your plants. So this schedule is something that we do about once a week. And again, that's depending on the size of our plants. Bigger plants are going to drink up more, so you're going to be able to feed more. And again, you can experiment. This is something that some people might be able to do every 4 or 5 days. In terms of the climate and your soil type, it might be something that people could do once every 10 days. So again, there's a whole range, and it's something that you need to experiment with because it's based on the size of your plants, the soil content, and all those factors coming into play. So this is our flower feed schedule. Again, some of it's organic with our compost tea, and then our synthetic nutrient, which is in a sense an organic source as it's the bone meal. And you can find all these at your grow shop. There's different companies that have these same exact nutrients. So if you have any questions about this feeding schedule, any feedback, anything that you'd like to share, please put your comments, questions down below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share. We got a lot of awesome content coming your way. We're moving into flower, harvest, curing, drying, so stay tuned.